The goat had just given birth behind the kitchen hut when Adama shouted, "He sent it again, Grandma! The money came! Baba sent it!" The words cut through the still morning air like a blade through ripe mango flesh. A chicken flapped nearby, disturbed by his voice, scattering dry earth with its claws. Adama ran across the courtyard, a white envelope in his hand, dust rising behind him as he skipped past the millet baskets and rusted water drum. Katie, the old woman everyone simply called Meme, didn't turn around. She was squatting by the fire, stirring a blackened pot of Debafloto oil. The steam from the bubbling oil rose around her face like mist, softening the deep wrinkles that mapped every season she'd lived through. Her hands, dark and strong, moved without thought. But her ears caught every word. "Did you hear me, Grandma?" Adama said again, waving the envelope. 50,000 francs. Baba sent it, just like he always does. Every single month. Meme turned slowly, her face blank, her eyes ancient. She looked at the boy, 11, thin like a hungry goat, but proud, standing tall in his hand-me-down shorts and dust-covered t-shirt. His grin was wide, unbroken, like he was carrying gold, and in a way, to him, he was. She nodded once. "Put it inside," she said quietly. Adama frowned. "That's all? You don't want to count it? It's 50,000, I swear. Same as last month. Baba's working hard in Abidjan. He always—" "Inside," she repeated. The boy sighed and turned toward the house, a square mud structure with a rusting zinc roof and a door made of wood so old it breathed in the wind. He pushed the door open and disappeared inside. Katie kept stirring the oil. The pot hissed and snapped as the dough balls floated to the surface, turning golden. She watched them carefully, one eye on the fire, the other lost in memory. Not the soft kind. The kind that stays buried under your ribs until someone digs it up, usually with a smile like Adama's. Her son, Mamadou, had left the village 8 years ago. Adama was just 3, still barely walking. Mamadou had promised he'd be back. "Only for a short while, Maman. The city will fix everything. Just let me go. I'll send money every month." He had kept his word. The money came, always. Sometimes late. But it came. What never came were the phone calls, or the letters, or the voice. There was a time, early on, when she waited by the roadside after the market. Her heart would jump each time a motorbike passed by, or a Peugeot slowed down near the fall compound. She imagined him stepping out, tall and laughing, hugging her like he did when he was a boy. Then years passed, and she stopped waiting. But Adama never stopped talking about him. At the village school, he boasted to the other boys that his father worked in a big company, that he lived in a house with running water, that he had a car, that he had friends in government, and always, the proof, the money. "Baba sent it," Adama would say with pride. "He never forgets us." Meme never argued. What would be the point? But sometimes, when she swept the yard in the early morning, before the sun had stretched its arms over the red horizon, she would whisper to herself, "If only money could hold a child's hand, or wipe his tears." Inside the house, Adama was kneeling beside the wooden box where the envelope stash was kept. He placed the new one on top. Each one looked the same, white, plain, no return address, no stamp. Just the name, Katie Fofana, scribbled in rushed handwriting, barely legible. He touched the envelopes gently, as if they were pieces of his father. As if inside them lived a voice he had never heard, and only imagined. After placing the envelope, he closed the box and looked at the photo on the wall. It was the only photo of Mamadou in the house, taken the day he left. He wore a pale blue shirt and held a small travel bag in one hand, while the other rested on Adama's shoulder. The boy in the photo looked confused. The man looked already gone. Adama stood and walked out again. Grandma, he said, walking up beside her. When Baba comes back, do you think he'll bring me a football? A real one, not the kind made with plastic bags. Katie kept her eyes on the oil. If he comes back, she said, her voice low. He will, Adama insisted. He sends money, doesn't he? She didn't answer. Instead, she scooped the Jibo Flotos from the pot and laid them on a metal tray, the oil hissing as they cooled. The smell, sweet and fried, filled the yard. Go wash your hands, she said. We'll eat before the sun climbs. As the boy walked away toward the outside basin, a gust of dry wind blew across the compound, lifting a layer of dust that stuck to the walls and faces like forgotten promises. Katie wiped her brow. Her knees ached. Her heart ached more. She looked at the envelope in her mind, sitting atop the others like a crown of lies. Something was wrong. She had known it for months, maybe even years. There was a quietness around the money, a silence, too perfect, like someone trying too hard to keep a secret buried. But secrets, like old bones, always find their way to the surface, and the surface was beginning to crack. The bus came once a week, Wednesdays, just before the sky turned from brass to copper. It groaned up the red hill, wheels spitting dust, horn whining like an old woman mourning her last son. Adama stood beside the village road, his feet bare, his eyes fixed. He didn't know why he was waiting. Maybe because Wednesday meant letters and money. Maybe because part of him, a quiet part he never said out loud, still believed his father might step off that bus, tall and smiling, carrying a leather bag and a story to explain it all. But the door swung open, and it wasn't Baba, just traders returning from Corhogo. A woman with a chicken in her lap, a man with cracked heels carrying a sack of onions, and then a stranger. He stepped down from the bus slowly, not from the village, not dressed like anyone from around here. Clean trousers, shirt tucked in. A face like someone used to cities, but with dust on his shoulders. He looked around, scanning. His eyes found Adama. You, he said, approaching. You are Adama Fofana? Adama blinked. Yes. The man looked him over, his thin legs, the threadbare shirt, the nervous eyes. Then he pulled something from his bag, a letter, plain, white, just like the others. This is for your grandmother, he said. From a friend. Adama took it slowly. The envelope was slightly thicker than usual. There was no writing on the front, no name, just sealed tight. Wait, Adama said. Are you from Abidjan? Do you know my Baba? The man paused. Then he gave the smallest smile. Not happy, just tired. I knew him. Then he turned and walked off down the road, his bag swinging at his side. Adama stood frozen. The letter felt hot in his hand. When he got home, he didn't run. He didn't shout. He walked quietly into the kitchen yard, where Mei was plucking herbs near the cooking stones. He held out the letter. She didn't take it at first. Then slowly, she wiped her hands on her wrapper and reached for it. Her fingers touched his, and paused. She looked at him. Something in his face. Something in his stillness. Without a word, she broke the seal. Inside were two things, a short note, written in careful French, and a photo. The note read, I have been sending the money in Mamadou's name since the day he passed. He was my friend. He died in a construction accident outside Abidjan over 6 months ago. I didn't have the heart to tell you. I just kept sending what little I could. I'm sorry. May God forgive me. Issa K. Katie's lips moved silently as she read, Adama. Stood by her knees, looking up. What does it say, Grandma? She didn't answer. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the photo. It showed 2 men in work uniforms, smiling on a dusty street. One of them was Mamadou, older than the photo on the wall, face thinner, eyes wearier. But still him. The other must have been the man from the bus. Adama reached for the photo. Baba, he whispered, smiling. He looks. Katie let out a sound, not a word, not a cry, just a long, dry moan from deep in her chest. She folded over herself, the letter falling from her lap to the ground. Adama picked it up. He read it, once, then again. His face didn't change at first. He blinked, then he blinked again. Then, slowly, like a branch breaking under too much weight, he dropped the letter and turned, and ran. He ran past the cooking pots, past the clothesline, past the goats, bare feet slapping. The red earth. He ran through the small gate and across the open field, where the wind had already begun its afternoon dance with the dust. He didn't stop until he reached the far edge of the farm, the part where the mango trees gave way to sorghum rows, and where the land rose slightly into a small hill. The place his father used to take him when he was smaller. Come, let me show you how to plant, Mamadou had said once, holding his tiny hand in his big calloused one. Here, you dig like this, then you drop the seed, gently, like putting a baby to sleep. Adama fell to his knees in that same soil. The dry ground cut into his skin. He didn't cry at first. He just sat there, shoulders trembling, hands clenching dirt. He remembered every lie he'd told. Every time he said, "My Baba sends money." Every time he made himself big in front of the other boys. He didn't know. He didn't know his father had died planting cement under city skies, while he'd waited for footballs and stories. He didn't know a stranger had been carrying the weight of his father's silence. But now he did, and it shattered something inside him. When the tears came, they came hard. Not noisy, not wild. Just steady, quiet, like rain falling on a roof at night when everyone is asleep. Back at the house, Katie sat alone, the letter in her lap, the sun sliding low across the yard. She didn't wipe her tears. She didn't speak. She just looked at the photo again and again, as if she could pull Mamadou's voice from the paper or taste his presence in the ink. As the sun disappeared, the chickens began to roost, and the village loudspeaker crackled with evening announcements. But neither the old woman nor the boy heard anything. They were both somewhere else, in memory, in grief, in the space between truth and what had been carried too long in silence. The days after the letter passed like smoke, always visible, always slipping through their fingers. Adama didn't talk much anymore. He still rose early, still swept the yard, still fetched water. But the boy who once bragged at the schoolyard, who once smiled when the postman arrived, that boy had gone quiet. Not out of anger, not shame. Something deeper. Something like understanding. He stopped asking when his father would come home. He stopped opening the envelopes. One afternoon, a week after the letter arrived, Meme found him sitting alone near the mango tree with a small tin box beside him. Inside it were all the things that had once belonged to Mamadou: a rusted pocket knife, a worn prayer bead bracelet, a small red whistle, and a faded paper with scribbles that looked like building sketches. Adama had arranged them like treasures. On the dirt, when Katie approached, he didn't look up. "I remember this," he said, touching the knife. "Baba used it to cut sugarcane for me once. I tried to take it and he said, 'You're too small. You'll cut your hand.'" Katie sat beside him on the ground. "He was right," she said softly. Adama smiled a little. Then he looked at the paper with the drawings. "Were these his dreams?" he asked. She nodded. "Your father wanted to be an architect, not just a mason. He said he'd build me a real house, with tile floors and glass windows. He used to draw them on the back of market receipts." Adama's eyes followed the faint lines on the paper. Then he looked at her. "But he never built anything for us, did he?" Katie took a breath. "No," she said. "But maybe he left something." Adama frowned. "Like what?" She looked at him, her eyes wet but steady. "You." The words landed like a stone in a quiet pond. He looked down. I used to think that money was everything, he said after a while. That it meant he cared. That it was love. Katie was quiet for a moment. Then she said, money keeps you alive, but it doesn't teach you how to live. They sat in silence again, listening to the cicadas buzz through the heat. In the distance, someone's radio played a love song in Dula, crackling with static. Later that evening, while the sun was folding itself into the earth, something unexpected happened. The man from the bus, the one who had delivered the letter, returned. He arrived on foot this time, walking slowly into the compound with dust on his shoes and guilt in his step. Katie saw him and stood up. Madame, he said, removing his cap. I came to speak with you. And with the boy. She gestured for him to sit on the log bench beneath the neem tree. Adama appeared from the back, holding a bowl of water, which he offered with a bowed head. No need, the man said gently. Thank you, son. When they had all sat, he spoke. My name is Issa Kone. Mamadou was my best friend. We came to Abidjan together. We worked construction, the kind nobody talks about. Long hours, no helmets, no contracts, just sweat and cement and hope. Katie listened without blinking. One day, a wall fell during a pour, Issa continued. We all ran. Mamadou didn't. He was trying to save another boy, a new one. He pushed him away, took the full weight. Adama stared. He died in my arms, Issa whispered. He said one word before he passed. Katie leaned forward. What word? Issa looked directly at Adama. Adama. The name sounded heavier in the air than ever before. I didn't know what to do, Issa continued. So I took his savings, sent it home. I sent more every month. Not because I had plenty, because I was afraid to tell the truth. I thought the money would cover the silence. Adama's lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. Katie looked at the man, eyes steady. You should have told us. I know, he said, voice cracking. But I wanted to protect his memory. And yours. Silence fell again. Then Adama asked, Why are you here now? Issa reached into his bag and pulled out a small notebook, worn, dirty, but filled with pages, sketches, building plans, scribbles in pencil, notes. Mamadou's dream, Issa said. He always said if anything happened, this should come home. He wanted his son to see it. He said Adama might be the one to finish what he started. Adama took the notebook with both hands. He opened the first page. There, in faded pencil, were the words, For my son, may you build what I could only draw. The boy didn't cry. Not yet. He held the notebook to his chest, as if holding a second heart. Katie rose and went inside. She returned with a folded cloth. Mamadou's old shirt, she handed it to Issa. You kept his spirit alive longer than you needed to. That's something, Issa shook his head. It wasn't enough. Katie looked at him with the wisdom of years. It never is. But it's what you did with the truth in the end that matters. As the man stood to leave, Adama rose too. Thank you, he said, voice firm. Issa smiled weakly. Your father loved you more than anything, Adama. I hope you know that now. I do. Issa turned and walked into the dusk. When he was gone, Adama sat again beneath the tree, turning the pages of his father's notebook, tracing every line. He saw houses with pillars, gardens, stairs. He saw dreams. He saw legacy. And for the first time since the letter, he felt something that wasn't grief. It was purpose. But grief, too, has one final lesson left to teach him, and it would come the very next day, in the same field where his father once taught him to plant. The next morning, before the sun had cleared the tops of the mango trees, Adama woke up, dressed quietly, and walked out with a hoe in his hand and his father's notebook tucked under his arm. Katie watched him from the doorway, her scarf tied tightly, eyes wide but silent. He didn't say where he was going. He didn't need to. The dry field waited beyond the last row of sorghum, the place where Mamadou had once held his small hand and said, "Here, you dig, gently, like you're putting a baby to sleep." Now Adama was alone in that same space. The sky was soft gray, the earth cracked and stubborn, the morning wind still cold enough to taste. He walked slowly to the center of the field and knelt. He opened the notebook and turned to a page his father had labeled in bold strokes, "The Foundation." It was just a sketch of a rectangle, some measurements, angles, little notes in the margins. But to Adama, it looked like a promise, a beginning. He placed the notebook beside him, picked up the hoe and began to dig. The ground was hard. Roots beneath the surface snagged and fought him. His hands blistered quickly, his arms ached, but he kept going. Each stroke of the hoe was a word unspoken, a memory dug out. When the hole was wide enough, he reached into the pouch of his pocket and pulled out a handful of seeds, old millet grains saved from last season. He opened the soil gently and placed them inside. Then, just as his father once showed him, he covered them with earth, patted it softly, and sat back. The wind shifted, and, for a brief second, it felt like someone had exhaled behind him. He turned. No one, just the tall grass swaying, the sun now peeking over the hills. But in that moment, he felt it. Not the presence of a ghost, but of a memory come to life. He remembered his father's hands, dry and wide, his deep laugh, his rare anger, the way he smelled of cement and sweat and something earthy, like rain on dust. He remembered his father saying, "One day, you'll plant something bigger than me." And now he had. Adama sat in the field for a long time, the morning slipping into afternoon. He opened the notebook again, flipping page after page. He didn't understand everything, the math, the lines, the angles, but he could feel what it meant, a dream left behind. Not to die, but to grow. Back in the compound, Katie waited with lunch. When the boy returned, his clothes were muddy, his eyes tired, but different. He had changed. Not just from grief, from understanding. She handed him a calabash of rice and peanut sauce. He took it without speaking, sat on the mat, and ate slowly. Halfway through the meal, he looked up and said, "Grandma." "Yes?" "I think I want to build something. For him? For us." Katie nodded. "What will you build?" He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "A place where no one forgets." She smiled gently. That's the most important kind of place. That night, after the sun dipped behind the hills and the chickens had tucked their heads under wing, Katie lit a single kerosene lamp and brought out something from the old trunk, a cloth bag, tied carefully. Inside it were all of Mamadou's school papers, his old ID card, a yellowing notebook filled with French vocabulary and geometry notes. Even his primary school award, a small certificate with faded ink. Best in drawing, class 5. She handed the bag to Adama. "You'll need these if you're serious," she said. "I am." He took the bag, holding it like something sacred. She watched him carefully. "You know," she said after a pause, "your father wanted so badly to give you a better life. He just didn't know how to come back once he left." Adama looked at her. "Why didn't he call? Even once?" Her voice cracked like dry wood. "I ask myself that every night." And for a moment, the silence returned. Not the peaceful kind. The heavy kind, full of the words people never said and the time they never reclaimed. But then, Adama did something unexpected. He reached for her hand, held it. Tight. No words. just warmth. That was when she broke. Just a little. Her tears came silently, sliding down her cheeks, not just for her son, but for the boy in front of her, who had lost more than his father. He had lost the right to say goodbye. The next morning, Adama went to the village school. He asked the teacher if he could stay after class to learn how to draw plans. The teacher, surprised, said yes. That day, Adama began to sketch. Small things at first: benches, windows, rooftops. But in every line, his father's hand guided him. Over time, the village began to notice. They saw how the boy who once bragged about money now spent his days drawing in the dust, measuring sticks, watching how rainwater flowed. They began to understand what he was building. And one day, years later, when Adama was tall and strong and full of quiet wisdom, he stood on the very field where he planted that first seed. Beside him stood a frame, wooden pillars, hand-carved beams, a foundation of stone. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't even a house. It was a library. Small, simple, sunlit, with one name carved into the wooden sign above the door. Fondation Mamadou Fofana, a place to remember. Inside, children came to read, to draw, to dream. And sometimes, on quiet afternoons, Adama would sit under the neem tree with his notebook, still the same one his father left, and whisper to the soil beneath his feet, "Baba, we're still planting."